Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, Dynasty League, PPR League, IDP League, even Daily Fantasy Football League. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your new host, Marcus Vargas, and I'm very excited to begin talking all things fantasy football with you guys. I do want to mention, however, we all know that right now the fantasy football season is pretty dormant, so while I'll be trying my best to keep things fantasy relevant, we're definitely going to be touching on more general football topics while fantasy football slowly starts to get back into motion. Before anything, though, I want to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So, I was born and raised in Philadelphia, PA. Yeah, I know, you guessed it, Eagles fan. Wrong. I'm actually a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan. Believe it or not, and no, I'm not a bandwagon. The reason is that my father was born and raised in Colombia. When he came to the States, he didn't really know much about American football, but he was watching TV one day and a documentary comes on about the Chiefs, and he basically is like, this looks cool, and I like this team. So ever since then, the rest was history. All of my brothers and I are diehard fans, and we definitely couldn't be more happy with how last season ended. 50 years in the making, and I'm just happy I was alive to see it. So, with that, let's get into it. Today, guys, we're going to start with the Cowboys. Yes, America's favorite team, or America's favorite team to hate, I should say. At this point in time, it seems almost inevitable that Dak Prescott is going to receive the franchise tag. The contract has been an issue since the beginning of this past season, and it almost feels as if there's been no progress. Every week, everyone's talking about the same thing. Should Dak take a hometown discount to help his team? My opinion on this is no. Pretty much the only reason we even talk about contract discounts is because of that guy in Foxborough, who is pretty much getting the boot as of right now. We look at Tom Brady's ridiculous success, and one of the main reasons we say it was possible was because he took massive discounts. Yes, he did it to help his team, but can anyone mention all of the huge deals the Patriots made in the past 20 years because of it? It's because they didn't make many. It's not like Tom Brady single-handedly allowed the Patriots to make huge extensions, and so they did it. Also, Tom Brady's gone on record mentioning his wife's income being a factor into why he took discounts as well. He felt he was able to and be just fine. Even if Dak was married to a rich person, this still doesn't really make any sense. We got to look at the market. And Jerry Jones can send a thank you letter to the LA Rams and his favorite NFC East team, the Eagles, for these complications. Jared Goff is getting $110 million guaranteed dollars. Now, not even Rams fans think he's worth that much money right now. Carson Wentz has a contract worth north of $137 million, and he has incentives that can bump it up to north of $150. If the Cowboys truly believe that Dak Prescott is their guy, this contract should have been made a long time ago. They waited way too long, and to be honest, it feels like they wanted to see if Dak would fail, and right now he's sitting pretty with a lot of leverage. Look, Dak Prescott finished last season with the second most passing yards, the fourth most passing touchdowns, and a better passer rating than both Wentz and Goff. It's only logical that he would expect a similar, if not better, payday than both of them. Not to mention, Wentz received his contract with a very suspect injury history. Dak is reliable. He shows up every Sunday. Now, guys, look, I'm a Dallas hater as much as the next guy. but Dak should be paid market value. It's clear the Jones family doesn't believe so. If Jason Garrett was the issue, you guys fired him. Every loss of their season was put on his shoulders. So what's the holdup? I don't remember everyone talking about Dak Prescott being the big issue. You paid DeMarcus Lawrence, and he pretty much did nothing all year. But the defense has nothing to do with Dak Prescott. Just pay the man. And look, I understand the notion of taking a discount to help your team. And I understand that Amari Cooper is also one of those tense situations for the Cowboys. But let's just hold on. Let's look at it this way. I don't really get the talks about Dak taking a discount to keep Amari Cooper because, well, look, Amari Cooper is not a scrub by any means, but it's just the plain truth that he's secondary to Dak Prescott. I mean, right now, there's no question that Dak Prescott is the leader of the Dallas Cowboys, and he's the face. There were games last year that I watched where it felt like Amari Cooper, he didn't even feel like suiting up. I mean, did anybody else watch the New England game where he basically tapped out after getting shut down? I mean, of course, we got to give credit to Stephon Gilmore, but have we ever said that about Julio, DeAndre, Michael Thomas? Amari deserves to be paid, yes, but not as much as people are thinking. The reason I say this is because Amari Cooper is actually two different receivers at home and on the road. The top paid guys are just great no matter what stadium they play at. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at some numbers. This past season, Amari Cooper finished with almost 1,200 receiving yards and 8 TDs. Yeah, that sounds great. Definitely a solid season. However, let's dive a little deeper into the numbers. Yeah, I know numbers usually never lie, but I think sometimes they can bend the truth a little bit. So like I said, Amari Cooper finished with just about 1,200 receiving yards. In all of his games on the road, Amari Cooper totaled 320 yards. Think about that for a second. 2/3 of the yards that he totaled in the season were at home games. What happens in the playoffs? If you're a lower seed, you need to go on a road. That's a much bigger game than regular season at the Jets. You know what I mean? So, to put Amari Cooper ahead of Dak Prescott, well, I shouldn't say ahead of Dak Prescott, but to say that Dak Prescott should take a discount so that they can keep Amari Cooper, to me right now, I don't think it makes as much sense as people think. I understand. You want to keep a team together, and almost everyone believes that this is one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. I just don't think that Dak Prescott should take a discount so that people like Amari Cooper and Byron Jones can stay on the team. I think those people can be replaced. I mean, have we seen the wide receivers coming out of this draft? It's one of the most stacked wide receiver classes we've seen in a while. And there's no doubt Michael Gallup has potential. He can turn into a really great receiver, and they can draft a new one. Now, I'm not saying they should let Amari Cooper go, but I do not think that Amari Cooper is big enough of a factor to say that Dak Prescott should take a discount to keep him on the team. And I also want to mention something else. Ezekiel Elliott was threatening to hold out games for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't remember anyone ever saying, should Ezekiel Elliott take a discount? See, so it's sort of interesting because a lot of people say that Ezekiel Elliott is the Cowboys. They need to put the ball in his hands. He will run them to a Super Bowl, the usual stuff. But were we saying that this past season? I mean, say what you will. Yeah, sure. Okay, the line wasn't blocking as well. But if you're paying that running back that much money, he should be carrying you guys to a Super Bowl. I mean, we saw Derrick Henry do it. If Zeke is the man that everyone says he is, and he gets that gigantic contract, now, I don't like to say, these people should be playing to their contract, but I get why people say it, and there's some truth to it, you know what I mean? The team is valuing you so much that they're willing to break the bank for you. They expect you to perform at an elite level always. Now, I get it. Every game can't be an amazing game. But this year, the Cowboys felt like Dak Prescott's team, not Ezekiel Elliott's team. And that's just the plain truth. Dak Prescott deserves a large contract. He does not deserve $200 million or Patrick Mahomes money, but he at least deserves to be paid like Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Not to mention, he was drafted in the 4th round. He has severely outperformed his draft position, and there's just no reason for this man not to have a contract already. But alright, that's enough of the Cowboys. Right now we're going to take a short little break, but stay tuned because we're talking Tom Brady, we're talking CBA, and we're going to talk some free agents and some trades that happen and how that shakes up the league and maybe even fantasy a little bit. Alright, stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, if you're just joining us, we just talked Cowboys, but now we're going to move on to the AFC. It was recently reported that Melvin Gordon and the Chargers have agreed mutually to let Gordon test free agency. Now, I know Melvin Gordon didn't have the best year, but I'm going to attribute that to the holdout, he wasn't really ready, the bad blood, and maybe he didn't really want to play with the Chargers anymore. Now, there have been talks about some potential landing spots for Melvin Gordon, and I think these are really interesting. You know, of course, Melvin Gordon didn't have the best fantasy football season last year. However, in years prior, 2018, 2017, he's finished as a top 10 fantasy running back, and he could very well do that again. So, I want to look at some of these potential landing spots and see what could be best for fantasy managers and if Melvin Gordon could repeat as a top 10 fantasy running back. These potential landing spots are pretty interesting. And as I look at these, I also have some that I think aren't being mentioned. So we're going to take a look at some. I'll give some of my ideas, and I'll let you guys know what I think. So the first team I want to talk about for a potential landing spot for Melvin Gordon, the Miami Dolphins. Yes, I know. The team was abysmal on offense, but there were some shining spots. You know, Ryan Fitzmagic did his thing, and of course he's inconsistent. But Devontae Parker finished with a pretty good fantasy season, considering. He finished with over 1,200 yards, and towards the end of the season was really looking like he could be something pretty special in Miami. Now, they let go of Kenyon Drake, and we saw what he did in Arizona. So they kind of got to make up for that little mistake there. If Melvin Gordon comes to Miami, and he puts up the sort of numbers and production that he did in LA prior to this year, it could be a real problem for the AFC East. Now, it would also take pressure off the quarterback and allow for the receivers to get more open, which of course leads to more fantasy production. However, my biggest concern is that the Dolphins don't really have a line, so this one's sort of a toss-up. Unless the Dolphins are going to draft one of the excellent linemen that we've seen at the Combine, which I don't think is going to happen, this one's going to be a little iffy. A lot of people are expecting the Dolphins to trade up and draft Tua. If that happens, it would help Tua to have a decent running back, borderline elite, to help him out. So, if Gordon goes to the Dolphins, I don't know. I don't think he finishes as a top 10 fantasy running back just because the franchise is in rebuild mode and they're not really win now. They don't really have a bunch of pieces on the line. There's not a bunch of pieces on the offense. And I think, Melvin Gordon would go there and be one of the best pieces on the offense. And it feels like sort of a repeat of what happened with Le'Veon Bell and the Jets. Le'Veon Bell looking for money, sort of like Melvin Gordon, went and got his check, but it did not really turn out well for fantasy and really even just for his football career and his legacy. This could end up being one of those situations. However, it could turn out well if Tua doesn't have any injury problems and he can produce as he did at the collegiate level. So very interesting to look at. If he goes to the Dolphins, it's kind of a toss-up, but you might be taking a risk, sort of like we did this past season, hoping that he wouldn't hold out, but he did. So very interesting landing spot. I think it could be great, but it also could be bad. We just have to see what the Dolphins do at the draft and whether they want to start winning now or they're still rebuilding. So on to the next one. The next team I want to look at for a potential landing spot, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers threw it all over the yard, and that resulted in a ton of interceptions. Now, I know Bruce Arians is going to be looking, if he wants to keep Winston, for many ways to limit these turnovers. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had no run game. Let's just be honest here. They sort of used a running back by committee, and neither of them were that productive. So if we look at this Melvin Gordon option, it's very interesting. I think he could go there and he could produce, put up some pretty good numbers, and he'll take pressure off of Jameis Winston. So I think to look at this in a fantasy manner, it's kind of interesting. Melvin Gordon will go there and he'll definitely do better than he did last year in LA because he would be the top dog, no question. And he'll take some pressure off of Jameis Winston and open up the play action. And yes, I know they've had two running backs, but they're nowhere near as productive as Melvin Gordon could be. I mean, let's take a look at the numbers here. Peyton Barber, in 4 seasons with Tampa Bay, has only averaged 3.6 yards per carry. That's pretty bad. So they're definitely going to let him walk in free agency. And yes, they have Ronald Jones, and he was looking okay at times during the season, but he's never carried the ball really more than 20 times a game. He's never been that workhorse. I think Melvin Gordon can come in, he'll take on that workhorse role, and since he's a good pass catcher, Jameis Winston doesn't have to keep bombing the ball down the field. Of course, he's going to get better with the LASIK eye surgery, and hopefully that helps him out. But if he can take more checkdowns to his running back, that's definitely going to help his efficiency, limit the turnover rate, and as you guys know, especially the ones who play PPR, those checkdowns to the running back, that's easy money. So this could be really, really good. If Melvin Gordon goes there, it's going to be good for everyone. Jameis Winston is definitely going to improve, as I've said already, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin aren't going anywhere. And we know Melvin Gordon is going to do better than he did last year. So, if you're a Melvin Gordon fan, I think going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is one of the better options. And he's definitely going to finish better than RB21 as he did last year. This, to me, is actually one of my favorite landing spots that I don't hear people talk about enough. So, look for Melvin Gordon to potentially go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and if he does, definitely shoot him up your draft boards. I think this could be very, very interesting. Now, the next team I want to talk about is one that could be interesting, but I'm not really sure of. The Washington Redskins. Now, there's definitely a need at running back in Washington. Adrian Peterson is about to turn 35 years old, and even though he's wowed us and he's stayed in the league for this long after serious injuries, the production is going to drop sometime and sometime very, very soon. Darius Geis, unfortunately, can't get over the injury hump and is just constantly getting hurt. And even though he has potential and he looks good at times, they're unsure of him. So while Melvin Gordon could easily end up in Washington, I'm not really sure that it's the best, at least for fantasy managers. And here's why. Dwayne Haskins. I hate to say it because I want to see the young kid thrive, but as of right now, he's not looking like the best quarterback possible. He's not looking like the best quarterback that he could be. He's very raw, and the team really doesn't have that many talented people at the skill positions. Terry McLaurin was a surprise, and he's definitely going to be something special eventually, but if Melvin Gordon goes to the Washington Redskins, you're going to have to expect that defenses are going to stack the box severely. Now, this is before we've even talked about the questions at offensive line. Trent Williams isn't coming back. We know that. He held out the entire year because he did not want to play for the Redskins. Also, 2 starters on the line, Brandon Scherf and Eric Flowers, are slated to hit free agency. So, I don't know how much you can shore up that line with this draft, and there's just a lot of question marks. I really don't know if Melvin Gordon coming here would be the best for fantasy managers, but of course, he can go there and he can get a check. So, there's not really much to say about this one other than the Redskins offense is still going to struggle next year. They're going to get Chase Young in the draft. I don't expect them to draft an offensive lineman, so their defense is going to get bolstered, and their defensive line could be one of the best in football, but unfortunately, that's not going to help us with Melvin Gordon and the fantasy offense. If he ends up with the Redskins, I don't think he will, but if he ends up there, hey, just take a chance on him if you want to, but I couldn't say that he's going to be elite or that he should shoot up your draft boards. So with that, let's move on to the next one. This one here is actually super interesting. The Detroit Lions. Now, PFF has the Lions as the favorite to land Melvin Gordon. This could be really, really good. Yes, some people will say, they have Kerryon Johnson. What about him? Well, Johnson's missed a ton of games in the past 2 seasons because of knee injuries. And for a running back, knee injuries usually don't end well, and they can shorten your career severely. Now, their offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell. So, he was with the Minnesota Vikings when they had Adrian Peterson, and he was also with the Seahawks when they had Beast Mode. So think about that. The guy's got experience with very potent rushing attacks, and right now, they really don't have that top dog who's going to, be the workhorse. Ty Johnson and Bo Scarborough can compete for snaps, but why not, take that risk and make a huge upgrade at the running back position? Detroit has struggled for so many years trying to get that one guy in the backfield to take that workhorse role every down back, and Melvin Gordon can do that. And I would love to see Melvin Gordon go into a system where they're sort of centering the offense around him. I think that could be really, really good. So, definitely some interesting stuff to think about. Well, right now, we're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned because we still got to talk the CBA, Tom Brady, and a little bit of other stuff. We'll be right back, and we'll see you after the break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking Melvin Gordon, and now I want to move on to another possible free agent, Tom Brady. The Tom Brady saga continues today with news breaking earlier this week that a phone call between Tom and Bill Belichick didn't really go well. At this point, it seems almost inevitable that Tom Brady's out of New England, but for some reason, I don't know if I can say for sure. I'm sure Belichick wouldn't complain if Brady came back because that's what's comfortable. There's no teaching a new guy the system or worrying about if it's a good fit. But there's also the sense that Belichick doesn't care either way. If Brady goes, he's going to find another heir to the throne. If Brady stays, it just delays that process. It's been evident for a while that Belichick's wanted Tom's successor. Jimmy Garoppolo was set to be that. but he got traded away after a tense situation between Belichick and Kraft. It's definitely possible that Belichick still has some resentment over that, which is why he refuses to sort of bend the knee, if you will. If Tom Brady's looking for Belichick to embrace him in a way in which he hasn't for the past 20 years, well, I kind of feel bad for him because I don't believe it's going to happen. And it's kind of messed up because it doesn't really feel right. Tom Brady's given a ton of the organization, and Robert Kraft has come out publicly and saying he wants Tom Brady so badly. So what's the holdup? The buck stops with Robert Kraft. He has the final say, just like he did with the Garoppolo situation. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on here we don't know about. Does Belichick have some sort of leverage? Is he threatening retirement if Brady stays? Who knows? But none of this feels like it ends with Tom Brady staying a New England Patriot. Recently, though, there's been a lot of buzz about Tom Brady making his way to the Niners. Now, a lot of people have dismissed this idea because of Jimmy G being there and obviously that whole situation. But I don't think it's actually as crazy as it sounds. Now, while I don't think the Patriots should be trading to get Jimmy G back, I do believe that Brady could do very, very well in the 49ers. Also, should the 49ers let go of Jimmy G, they'd be saving a ton of money. So, to me, this almost seems like a no-brainer. So, I want to ask this question. Or maybe, ask yourself this question. If Tom Brady was playing for the 49ers in that Super Bowl, are you still sure that they lose that game? Does he throw that fluttering ball that got picked off by Bashaud Breeland? Does he miss Emmanuel Sanders wide open for potentially the game-winning touchdown? I don't know. But it's very interesting to think about. And not to mention that if the 49ers wanted to squash all these ideas and rumors, they very well could have. All it takes is them endorsing their QB and saying, no, this is not going to happen. Jimmy Garoppolo is our guy. However, what many people may have seen as Kyle Shanahan leaning on what was working in the playoff, I just believe there isn't much trust between him and Jimmy G. Shanahan definitely prefers to put the ball in the bellies of Mostert, Coleman, and Breida rather than having Jimmy G make questionable decisions in crucial moments. So that says a lot. If what people are saying is true, and that Tom Brady struggled because of the shoddy line, his lack of receivers, all the drops, then wouldn't it make perfect sense that Tom Brady would return to dominance in San Fran? They have a solid line. With the help of Kittle and Juszczyk blocking very well, Brady would have plenty of time in the pocket. Their defense is outstanding, which means Brady's going to have plenty of short fields and way more turnovers. That gives him way more opportunities, just like the Pats defense did for him. And have you seen the San Francisco 49ers rushing attack? Would that not serve Brady well? He'd be taking less hits, and he can benefit a ton from the play action. In my opinion, at this point in time, Jimmy G sort of feels like a swing and a miss. I really don't think that anyone truly believes that without Jimmy G, the 49ers wouldn't have made the Super Bowl last year. With that rushing attack and that defense, I think there are plenty of game managers that can go out there and get just as far. We just have to remember, I'm not saying the 49ers have a Ravens defense, but Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl, guys. Think about that. And while betting odds still have the Patriots as a favorite to land Tom Brady, I'm just not sure that's going to happen. It feels like this all the talk between, or about Brady, Belichick, and Kraft, I feel like that would have seemed much more positive if the Patriots were truly the favorites to land him. At this point, it just feels like they're the betting favorites because he's been there for 20 years. Why would he leave? I don't know how much substance there is to these odds. And so, if Brady doesn't end up with the 49ers, expect him to go somewhere that has a good offensive line. Somewhere like Indianapolis. Somewhere like Tennessee. Somewhere maybe like the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers made an interesting move recently, trading Russell Okung to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for Trey Turner. Now, a lot of Carolina Panthers fans are baffled by this move. Okung is 31 years old, while Trey Turner is only about to turn 27 and has been selected to 5 consecutive Pro Bowls. Now, this could be sort of foreshadowing. The Chargers are trying to shore up the offensive line to become more attractive for Tom Brady. Now, of course, it's not official, but it's very interesting to think about. We just so happen to have a draft class with great tackles, and the Chargers just happen to have a very early pick in the first round. Now, a lot of people expect them to pick a QB, but if they want to win now, what if they get Tom Brady, shore up the line, and who knows, maybe make a run at the Super Bowl? It's all very interesting, and it doesn't feel like this move was made for no reason, just to swap offensive linemen. The Chargers had trouble at guard, and now they can possibly draft a great tackle to protect Tom Brady. And can we talk about the weapons that the Chargers have for a second? I understand there are other favorites to land Tom Brady, but the Chargers are going to have Austin Eckler, who perhaps was the best pass-catching back in the NFL last year, and they have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Some drafts also have them selecting a wide receiver in the second round. To me, it just feels like Tom Brady would be basically upgrading 3 times over if he lands in LA rather than some other teams. The Titans have a great line as well, but I don't know if I would rather have A.J. Brown over Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Of course, they have Derrick Henry as well, but Tom Brady's never really needed a, workhorse, every down bruising kind of back. We've seen what he's done with James White. So Austin Eckler, to me, is just a better, younger version of James White. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of dump-offs that are going to result in big, big yards. And we can talk about their defense. Derwin James will be back at full health. They have Casey Hayward, other great DBs, Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram. It's just, of course, it's not as solid as the Patriots defense. They're not going to be holding teams to 14 points per game, perhaps. But he's also going to have a solid defense along with a phenomenal offense. It's something to really think about. The LA Chargers also are located in California, Tom Brady's home state. Not to mention, his wife, who we all know is very important and factors into his NFL decisions, could also be attracted by LA. A lot of things go on over there, It's Hollywood, movies, music, actors, models. So it's all something really interesting to think about. So I'll let you guys simmer with that, think about that. And of course, we're going to be touching on this topic more and more throughout the week, more and more when free agency starts, and when we figure out more about Tom Brady. But now, we're going to take a real quick break and stay tuned because we're going to talk CBA and a little bit more. Alrighty guys, see you back soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking Tom Brady, and now I want to move on to the CBA. Now, for a lot of people, the CBA might be a bit confusing. You don't know what it is, why it's happening, what it all means. And basically, I just want to go over a few highlights of the CBA, some things that could be changing in the NFL, and just give my opinions on everything that's going on. So, the CBA, or Collective Bargaining Agreement, is essentially just an agreement between the players and the owners that sets health and safety standards and establishes benefits, including pensions and medical benefits, for every single player in the NFL. Basically, the reason why this is such a big deal right now is because the old CBA is set to expire soon, and the new one needs to be agreed on very, very soon. Now, this new one has several things in it, but I want to touch on a few topics that I think are interesting and just give my opinions on everything that's been going down. So, the first thing I want to touch on is the 17-game season. Now, the CBA, a lot of it has to do with protecting players, player health and safety, and right now, a lot of the NFL's, top guys, Richard Sherman, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, have vocalized their dislike for the new CBA. A lot of players believe that adding another game is going to shorten careers even more, increase injuries, and just not be good for the players overall. The main problem with this is every single NFL player gets to vote. So there's guys, just making $500,000, and that's another game check. That's more money for them. Guys that aren't playing in games, bench players that don't have to deal with that sort of punishment to their bodies. Also, they're trying to leave with as much money as they possibly can. As fans, it's sort of hard to relate with the guys that don't want this to happen because a 17th game means more football for us. And so I can understand why people like this. For a second, I'm like, oh man, another game? It sounds cool, but in actuality, we have to think about the players and what's best for them. If the NFLPA representatives don't feel like this is a good thing, then they're probably vocalizing all of the thoughts that their teammates are having. It's not just theirs. So we do have to respect that and understand that. Now, another thing I want to add on to this is that Emmanuel Sanders this year played 17 games because of the midseason trade that happened. And he is strongly vocalizing his dislike for this idea. A lot of guys, especially veterans, when they get older, they're feeling these hits more. Their injuries are more nagging. They're not as explosive as they used to be, and it's not as easy to play a full season as hard as you can. And so we have to consider these things because there are a lot of veterans who are going to have to deal with this that may not want it, and a lot of the people who may approve this probably won't even be in the league when it takes effect, and won't be in the league for the 10 years that it's going to be in effect. So it's all very interesting. A lot of guys also have talked about if they add the 17th game, they're also going to add 14 teams to the playoffs instead of 12, which will end up eliminating the bye week for the second seed. Now, a ton of players don't like this because when it gets down to it, and it gets down to that gritty part of the season, and everyone's playing hard to try for that playoff spot, and you're playing harder than you may have been when you were fresher and had more energy in the beginning of the season, the bye weeks are crucial. Now, of course, people want to talk about bye weeks and whether that affects players, their mojo and their momentum, and it can throw them off. But the thing is, really, it helps them heal up and get ready for that next push to the Super Bowl. Again, this comes down to player safety, player health, and career length. If we want these guys to have lasting careers and not just be playing football violently for our entertainment, we have to show that. So it's sort of concerning when guys feel this way because they shouldn't really just feel like they're pieces for entertainment or just, not human beings. And so that makes me a little upset, but unfortunately, a lot of people think that this CBA is going to go through. So what bothers me most about it is that, our favorite players and the leaders of this league aren't going to like how the league is shaping out to be. So you can see how that's going to cause tension between players and owners, and I don't know if that's what's best for the league. The 17th game, of course, is going to make a ton more money for owners, and they are giving the players a little uptick in total revenue share, but I just don't know if the leaders of the league, the veterans, if they don't believe that this is right for the league and they're representing their teams, then maybe it isn't. Everyone deserves a voice, of course. It's just very hard when there are guys, making $30 million a year and guys making $900,000 a year, their opinions are going to vary so differently that they might not take into account, each other because they cannot relate. So it's very interesting. Another thing I want to touch on is the substance abuse policy that is coming in with this new CBA. Essentially, players won't be suspended anymore for testing positive for marijuana use. Now, marijuana use has been a polarizing topic basically forever. A lot of people think players should be allowed to smoke weed whenever they want, and a lot of people don't think so as well. I think, in my personal opinion, you don't have to agree. This sort of feels like the owner's perfect chess move to get most of the players to approve the CBA. They only need a simple majority. There are 2,000 players voting on it, so basically it just has to be 1,001 to 999 and this CBA goes through. I can tell you right now that a ton of NFL players that don't get much playing time aren't receiving these huge checks. The ones who smoke weed a ton and don't want to be suspended are going to be blinded by this part of the CBA. And to me, it's pretty disappointing. We've seen guys like Stephen A. Smith, he's very known for telling guys to, stay off the weed, all that stuff, and it's funny. But when you think about it, it's pretty sad. These guys are professional athletes. They've worked their entire lives for this, this opportunity to be in the NFL, to make a living off of their passion in a sport. And it just seems silly to me that smoking weed has become such a habit, so ingrained in their lives that, they're willing to give up a ton of other stuff, such as their own safety, risk of injury, things of that nature. So, it's all very interesting stuff. The vote is happening now, and the ballots close March 12th, so we'll see what happens. A lot of people are expecting this vote to go through. I'm just hoping that no matter what happens, our players can roll with the punches and nothing, hopefully, no strikes happen, nothing crazy of that nature. I hope for the success of the league, but I also hope for player safety, and I want them to feel safe as well. I want them to feel valued. There's nothing worse than going into work every day and feeling like you're not a valued part of the team or that people don't care about you. So there needs to be a perfect balance between the owners getting what they want, the players getting what they want. Of course, you can't have everything you want, but each side has to feel like, this is worth it. I feel like we can work together rather than just, trying to outdo one another and pull a fast one on each other. So it's all been very interesting. We'll see how it all shakes out. But it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on in the coming days. It's a very, very interesting time for the NFL. Now, we're about to go into a short break. But after the break, I want to talk about someone who's been very vocal against the CBA because of health reasons and safety reasons. And that's Kansas City Chiefs defensive lineman Chris Jones. He went on Colin Cowherd and discussed his displeasure with the CBA, saying that there needs to be much less padded practices, much less physical contact if the NFL wants to expand the season to 17 games. He also mentioned wanting a second bye week during the regular season and only 5 total padded practices during the preseason. So it's very interesting stuff. He brings up some valid points, and he's a very interesting player. So I want to talk about him and whether the Chiefs actually plan on keeping him next year after franchise tagging him. So stay tuned, and right after the break, we'll talk more Chris Jones.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking some CBA. I gave my opinions on that. And we finished that talk mentioning Chris Jones, who's been one of the more vocal guys against the CBA. Recently, the Kansas City Chiefs have vocalized their plan to franchise tag Chris Jones. And that was received with some mixed emotions. So, I kind of want to give my thoughts on franchise tagging players. So the franchise tag is essentially a 1-year investment into a player. Now the problem with it is players get offended by the franchise tag, and understandably so. The team is basically saying, yes, we want to pay you and we want to keep you, but only for 1 year. And the reason why people dislike this is because if you're only paid for 1 year and secure for that 1 year, if you go out the next year and you get injured, then you're basically done. You're not going to be signed to a long-term extension. I understand that, but I believe that there is some justification to the franchise tag. There is, especially with the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, when I heard Chris Jones was feeling mixed emotions about the franchise tag, it worried me. He began this season threatening to hold out if he didn't receive an extension, and fortunately he showed up, but I was really worried for a second that he might hold out a couple games. Unfortunately, the downside to having, the world's best quarterback is that you're going to have to give him the world's biggest contract. And that's the problem right now. It's really great having a young, dynamic, amazing quarterback that people think is going to make the Hall of Fame already only in his 3rd year. But if you're giving him a $200 million contract, that doesn't leave much money for the rest of the team. Chris Jones is essentially a cornerstone piece of this franchise, and he was here before Patrick Mahomes. He's been great, constantly improving, and if you watch the Super Bowl, his batted passes were crucial to the victory. I understand, of course, the quarterback is always going to get the most airtime. Patrick Mahomes made the amazing throw to Tyreek Hill, but we can't ignore the fact that Chris Jones made a huge impact on the game. And that's how he's feeling right now. Players take it personally. We saw what happened with Kirk Cousins in Washington, but that felt a little bit different. It felt pretty clear that the Washington Redskins did not want Kirk Cousins for the long term, and they just kept franchise tagging him. This, to me right now, feels like the Kansas City Chiefs want to franchise tag him while they work out the details of Patrick Mahomes' contract. They'll pay Chris Jones for a year, and then they can sign him to a massive deal, later on once they know how their money's going to end up in the coming years. But I do want to talk about the possibility of Kansas City, unfortunately, trading Chris Jones and what they could fetch for him and where he could end up. Because it's definitely a possibility. I know Brett Veach has vocalized the fact that they want to keep Chris Jones and they want to keep Sammy Watkins as well. But we all have a salary cap, so it's something you have to work around, you have to deal with, and hopefully, Chris Jones has vocalized as well. He wants it to be a Chief for life, so I hope this didn't create too much bad blood and that he understands that the Chiefs have to get their money right in other places as well. And it sounds horrible to say, but it's just the plain truth. The quarterback position is the most important position on a football team. I understand that there have been teams, that go to the Super Bowl with a mediocre quarterback, or they have great success, a la Trent Dilfer. But history has shown us that you need a great quarterback to win Super Bowls. So, no offense to Chris Jones, but he's just not the most important player on the Chiefs right now. And I understand his mixed emotions and feelings about it all. So, let's get into some potential things that could happen with this whole franchise tag, tag and trade scenario. While I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs will trade him, I think it'll be interesting to look at some of the teams that they could possibly make a trade with and to see what they could get back. Now, of course, like I said, do I expect this to happen? No. But the Chiefs did this with Dee Ford as well when he had basically a career year. So it's interesting to look at. So the team I want to start with is the Seattle Seahawks. Now, last year the Kansas City Chiefs traded for Frank Clark, and that ended up pretty well for them as he did very well in the playoffs. Now, the only way they're going to trade Chris Jones is if they trade him out of the conference. They're not going to want to see him even once a year, let alone twice a year in the division. So the Seahawks sort of make sense. You're only going to have to see him if you play him in the Super Bowl. And if he makes it there, well, credit to them. So the Seahawks are actually slated to have a ton of salary cap space, 8th most in the league next season, so they can afford to land Chris Jones. After the Jadeveon Clowney situation didn't really go as planned, I could see this working for Seattle, and, we were just recent trade partners, so there is that connection there. Chris Jones would give Seattle a much-needed boost in the pass rush. Their defense is nowhere near what it used to be during the Legion of Boom, and I think if the Seahawks want to make a real run at the Super Bowl, they can't just rely on Russell Wilson to carry their offense and carry their offense over their defense as well. They need some help. Chris Jones could be a perfect fit because he's been great at defensive end. He's also been great at defensive tackle. With Pete Carroll there, he's had experience with amazing defenses. Chris Jones could be lethal in a Seahawks uniform. So if they do plan on trading him, that's probably the top spot I would think that they would trade him to. It just makes perfect sense. Last year the Seahawks only had 28 sacks as a team total. And, Shaq Barrett almost got 20 by himself. So just think about that, to put that in context. But now I want to talk about another team that could potentially land Chris Jones. And while I would like to say, maybe the Colts, I would want to keep him out of the AFC. So I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, of course, their team isn't very good. And I don't know if they're going to be doing things in the near future. But Chris Jones is a young guy. He's very talented. They're a young team. And they have cap space. I think if Kansas City trades him to Arizona, they would pair him with Chandler Jones. That would be a scary pass rush basically immediately. And Kansas City is going to be asking for at least a first-round pick. If they don't get at least a first-round pick from any of these teams that I've mentioned, actually, there's no point in doing this trade. Chris Jones is only 25, 26 years old. He's elite. He's entering his prime. He's too valuable to let go for something like Dee Ford's second-round pick to the 49ers. If they trade him to the Cardinals, they can expect the first-round pick to be middle of the round, maybe even earlier than that. So it could definitely be worth doing because you're going to get premier talent out of that pick. And yes, of course, you lose Chris Jones, but, maybe they draft a pass rusher in this. I know they're at the bottom of the round, but you can draft a pass rusher, develop them, and see what happens. And maybe use that pick that you got from the Cardinals to replace him. I want to remind everyone that Chris Jones was actually drafted in the second round. So the Chiefs definitely got a steal there. He's been absolutely dominant. He forces double teams. Every team needs that kind of guy. So, of course, the Chiefs would like to keep him. But the money has to be right. So it's all very interesting. And while I would understand, you got to let him go because you can't afford him, I seriously would urge the Chiefs to get this deal done because one other thing about Chris Jones is, yes, he's a great pass rusher and he has all this experience. He's a Super Bowl champ. Super Bowl experience is sort of an underrated thing. I don't hear, that many people talking about it, but if you got guys that have played in a Super Bowl, there's not that many guys that can say they've played in one and won one, and he was in a game in which they were down. The defense had to step up and make big plays, and he made those plays when he needed to. Swatting those passes, and he also put pressure on Jimmy G when he threw that interception early on in the game. That's intangible stuff right there, and you can't really put a price on that. So Chris Jones, right now, being a cornerstone piece of this franchise, should definitely not be traded. But it is very well possible. The Chiefs have done it before. I would not like to see him go, but at the end of the day, we all know the NFL is a business, and, owners, GMs, they're going to do what's right for the business of the team because money is king. Now, we're going to take another short break before our last topic, guys. I want to thank you for sticking with us, and stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hey guys, welcome back to the last portion of the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast today. I want to thank you guys for sticking with us and tuning in. Right now, we're going to talk about some sort of power rankings for next season. Yeah, it's a bit early, but it's definitely interesting to look at, what teams are going to be making that playoff push, a Super Bowl run. Can the Kansas City Chiefs repeat? Are they going to fall short? So it's all very interesting to look at. So I want to give you guys my sort of list and, you guys can have your opinion on it. Just want to put it out there. This is definitely what I think is going to happen next year. So let's get into it. And of course, I'll be updating these power rankings as we go along through free agency, through the draft. So I want to start now so we can see how this list shakes up, post free agency, post draft, and right before the season starts. So, I want to preface this by saying I'm going to do a top 15. I feel like I would do a top 10, but I want to add those teams as sort of, fringe top 10 teams as well. I feel like doing a full 32 is sort of unnecessary. We don't really need to know who's going to be the worst team, who's going to be the 27th best team. We want to look at the top 15 teams to see who can possibly make a run at the Super Bowl. So I want to start with number 15, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the reason I'm putting them here is because not that I want Tom Brady to go here as they're in my division. However, I think Tom Brady should go here because they'd be a powerhouse. So I'd put them there for that reason. Number 14, the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons have just been a massive disappointment the past 2 years. And I feel like after that Super Bowl disappointment, they really haven't recovered. I really want to see them recover here. Julio Jones is a monster. He isn't going anywhere. Matt Ryan is still there. If they can just get better on defense, this team can make a push in the playoffs. At number 13, I have the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I'm really not too sure about this, and the reason I put this here is because that team has a solid defense. They have Jalen Ramsey, and have you heard of Aaron Donald? He can single-handedly carry a pass rush. Now, if Todd Gurley's health concerns don't get better, the team is going to be similar than they were last year. Because I like to think of Todd Gurley sort of as like, the olden days man of the house. He goes out and he works and he gets the money so that the bills can be paid. But if the man of the house isn't going out and working, then the kids aren't eating. And Jared Goff is sort of like the kids in that situation. If Todd Gurley isn't out there putting up huge numbers, then Jared Goff is going to struggle yet again. And I'm going to be wrong about this. They won't even be in the top 15. But for now, I'm expecting them to take care of some of the issues that they had this season and at least be number 13. At number 12, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, to be quite honest, this is a bit low. And the only reason I put them here is because I don't expect them to really fill all of the holes that they're going to have on the offense. Jordan Howard is a free agent. There's talk of Alshon Jeffrey leaving. Zach Ertz is only getting older. Carson Wentz, of course, always has injury concerns. And do we know really if Miles Sanders is proven? So it's very interesting. Jason Peters just announced that he's going to test free agency, so they're losing a piece on that offensive line. And things are really changing in Philadelphia. I do think they have potential to make the playoffs again. They always have potential to win the NFC East, but I'm not sure if they're a top 10 team just yet. Next, Minnesota Vikings. Now, this might shock a bunch of people because The Minnesota Vikings were pretty good this year. I just don't trust Kirk Cousins. Now, I know they beat the Saints in the playoffs this year, but for some reason that just felt like a fluke to me. To me, it felt like it had more to do with Drew Brees having a bad day at the wrong time rather than the Vikings actually being better than the Saints. I do think they're going to be the same, but I don't think they're going to crack the top 10. I do think Dalvin Cook's still going to put up massive numbers, but do I trust Kirk Cousins to take them to the playoffs again and make a deep run, be a top 10 team? Not really. At number 10, I hope everyone doesn't hate me for this, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the reason I have the Dallas Cowboys here is because their roster is filled with a ton of talent, and that's undeniable. They severely underperformed last year, and I expect that to completely change. Of course, I don't think Mike McCarthy's going to come into Dallas and just turn that team into Super Bowl champions. However, I think he has to look at what the Cowboys were doing wrong, and he's really going to need to change the culture around there if he wants to keep his job for a while. Mike McCarthy seems like, he's been dying for an opportunity. He seems happy to be with Dallas. They have a ton of talent, and they kept Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, so the offense should be just as potent as it was. As long as the defense can get things right, I can see Dallas winning the division and being a top 10 team in the league. We'll just have to see. At number 9, and this is a bit surprising even for myself, I have the Tennessee Titans. Mike Vrabel is doing a fantastic job in Tennessee, and as long as they keep Derrick Henry, he's going to be able to run them into a division win. But Ryan Tannehill has to stay, and their defense just has to keep performing as they've been. There's not many things that have to go right for them, I feel like. A.J. Brown is up and coming. He's going to be great. And as long as they did everything they did right in the second half of last year when Derrick Henry just turned up the juice, they're going to be back in the playoffs and they're going to be dangerous. And not to mention, the Tennessee Titans have been mentioned as a possible suitor for Tom Brady. So I did mention, Ryan Tannehill should stay, but if Tom Brady comes into town, they'll definitely be a top 10 team. At number 8, I have Houston Texans and Deshaun Watson. That's all I really have to say. He's one of the most clutch players I've seen. He's fantastic. He has DeAndre Hopkins. He has Will Fuller, Kenny Stills. The team is very good. Now, they still have questions on the defense and on the offensive line, but there's no reason that Deshaun Watson can't carry this team to be a top 10 team and to make the playoffs again. However, they have to look out for Tennessee. The only reason I'm giving Tennessee, the spot under them is because Deshaun Watson is a lethal quarterback. Now at number 7, I actually have a surprise here. The Buffalo Bills. I expected the Buffalo Bills to make a deeper playoff run than they did, and it just feels like they're one Josh Allen short of making a really deep playoff run. Their defense is great. They gave the Baltimore Ravens a run for their money, and it just feels like if Josh Allen can take a few steps forward, this team could be a serious threat. And if Tom Brady leaves the Patriots, they're definitely going to win that division. And to me, they're going to win it pretty easily. At number 6, the Green Bay Packers. Now, some people may believe that the Green Bay Packers were really just a 7-9 team in disguise. They have Aaron Rodgers, and as you all know, he's a bad man, just like Stephen A. Smith says. Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen, and I just can't bet against him. I really think that the Green Bay Packers are going to take a step forward next year. They're going to fill some of the problems they have, hopefully draft a receiver to be alongside Devontae Adams because they need help on the offense. Aaron Jones he's sort of coming into his role as a star running back. Not quite there yet, but they do have a running back. They need to draft maybe a linebacker or two, but we'll see what happens. I expect them to be a top 6 team. I expect them to be in the playoffs, no problem. At number 5, the New Orleans Saints. Now, I actually kind of expect them to be maybe a top 3, top 4 team, but we just have to see how Drew Brees plays next year. He knows it's his last ride. He knows, he's got to go for broke, put everything on the line there. And as long as they have Michael Thomas, who's clearly unguardable because right now he's basically their only receiver and he's still set the reception record, they're going to be just fine. Number 4, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, as long as Seattle drafts well and they shore up the defense, Russell Wilson and that running offense can make a deep push into the playoffs. I believe Russell Wilson was clearly in the race for MVP this year. I understand he started to fall off a bit towards the end of the season, but he, let's not forget a couple years ago, he single-handedly accounted for, above 80% of the offensive touchdowns that the Seattle Seahawks scored. As long as he's their quarterback, they're going to do great. They just have to, help DK Metcalf come more into his own and just do the things necessary not to just make the playoffs, but to make a deeper push. I think they're going to improve this coming year a lot. Number 3, I actually have the 49ers. I say this because I don't believe in Jimmy Garoppolo. While I believe in that run game and that amazing defense, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is constantly going to keep them from the ultimate goal, the Super Bowl. Number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens. And at number 1, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. While I think these two are sort of tied, I do think the Chiefs have the potential to repeat as Super Bowl champions because of the immense riches they have on that offense. We've seen Patrick Mahomes overcome his horrible defense, and he just makes magic happen. On the other hand, though, Lamar Jackson is coming. If Lamar Jackson improves his passing more than he did last year, the Ravens will be favorites to win the Super Bowl. But as of right now, Lamar Jackson struggles in the playoffs. He struggles when it's time to throw the ball. And for that reason, I have them at number 2. But look out for the Ravens to be Super Bowl favorites yet again, as they were until they ran into the Tennessee Titans. So just to recap, I got Chargers 15, Falcons 14, Rams 13, Eagles 12, Vikings 11, Cowboys 10, Titans 9, Texans 8, Buffalo 7, Packers 6, Saints 5, Seattle 4, 3 Niners, Ravens 2, and Chiefs at number 1, your reigning Super Bowl champs. So guys, that's the end of our show today. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back on Wednesday, but of course, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I just want to ask you guys, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really helps us. We can understand what we're doing wrong and how we can improve. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that'd be awesome as well. Thank you guys and have a good rest of your day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.